talk by Simon Kemp. I appreciate you guys coming in on a Tuesday afternoon. And if you have not attended these kinds of meetings before, we've done maybe over 100 over the last maybe five, 6 years. And this is, since August, this is the 6th one. Yulin, correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. 6th one?
Correct.
Yeah, 6th one already in September and late August. So it's actually, we're ramping up with the new mechanisms. Before, you all used to visit us on campus and we'll say you box lunch. So this one essentially provides us with an opportunity to get people from all over, not just Singapore, not from SMU and SME community. And we're seeing a huge jump in attendance. Yeah. So last week when we had one, we had over 100 participants. Yeah, not signups, but participants. Tomorrow we have one where the signups are close to 500. So we'll see how many actually show up. So we have now enhanced the quality of Zoom to be able to do that. So anyway, so just to give you a preamble, my name is Srini Reddy. I'm a professor of marketing and the director of the Center for Marketing Excellence, which conducts this. I've been on board since 2009, and we've done, as I said, several hundred of these. And each year it's exciting because we get fantastic speakers. Some of them are old friends and speakers who have done it several years ago, but they all bring something new to the table each time. And so Simon, this is the first time he's with us. Yeah, but he has actually been associated with SMU, and so I believe he's worked with other faculty members and talked to some of the classes here. Very quickly, before I introduce and then open up the thing for Simon, a couple of housekeeping things. Please keep your stuff on mute. Try to think of questions as the presentation goes along, and you can actually sort of submit those in the chat. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see the chat icon. You submit those privately to Huling or me, and so during the break, I will actually sort of curate those questions and pose it to Simon, and then he can respond. So today's session is a little bit different than the other ones we have done. Yeah, typically I ask the speaker to stop every 15 minutes so he can field the questions. Today, I think Simon has actually done a remarkable job. He has actually a video that he will load up and then present, which lasts about 20 minutes. So pay attention to what is being said. And so jot down any questions that you may have and post them. So at the end of 20 minutes, and Simon is here for the rest of the period to essentially field any questions that you may have. Okay, so my task is to listen carefully as Simon's video proceeds, and then look at any comments that you actually provide, and actually capture them and then pose it to Simon, such that everything is in order. Okay, so again, thank you so much. Welcome. And just before we start the video, Simon has been a resident of Singapore, I believe, I heard 15 years.
Close to 15, yeah. Close
to 15 years. And he has worked with many companies and ad agencies and consulting firms like Accenture and McCann, yeah. And most recently, he is the founder and the CEO of a company called Kepios, yeah, and which is a consulting arm in this new digital world. So, and they produce a reports called the Data Portal, and I think he's going to talk a little bit about that, yeah. So anyway, so this is actually exciting because in the field of digital, we still need a lot more knowledge to train us. And so not only the staff, and I was just talking with him earlier, that even the senior managers need some education in terms of what digital can do and cannot do, right? A full understanding of it. And so I really appreciate Simon coming in today. And so without much ado, yeah, so you might actually expand the introduction a little bit, Simon, and Huling will help us set the video up as soon as you do.
Super. Thank you very much. And yeah, thanks folks for joining us today. Appreciate you giving up some of your lunchtime to join us. As we've just heard, I'm going to go through a video presentation with you today. This is part of our commercial offering. So typically this is something that our paying clients would see when they get one of our quarterly briefings. And the video is about 20 minutes long, but the real focus of today's session is to get your questions and challenges on what's happening in the world of digital. So once I've played the video, please do share your questions with us, share your challenges, ask the things that you need to understand to help you make sense of all of these things, but also to implement the implications into your business as well. So as I said, I'm going to play you a quick video to start with, 20 minutes or so, and then we'll get into the Q&A after. If you're interested to know more about what Kepios and Data Report will do, I'm not going to give you a sales pitch today. If you're interested to know more about what we do, please do contact me, and I'll give you a much better sales pitch in person rather than taking you through it on your lunch hour today. Let me just get this video loaded up for you though, and we'll dive straight into the presented content. Thank you very much, and thanks to all of you for joining me today too. I'm Simon Kemp, great to meet you all, and I'm the founder of Kepios, which is a management consultancy that helps people all over the world to make sense of the real behaviours behind the latest digital trends. A big part of that work centres on the global digital reports that we produce on behalf of We Are Social and Hootsuite. These reports offer insights into what people in 250 different countries are doing on the internet, social media, mobile devices and e-commerce. And we make all of those reports available for free over on our website. And don't worry, I will share a link to that website at the end of today's presentation. In addition to those reports, we also provide detailed briefings on the implications of the latest digital trends, and that's what today's session is all about. We'll start off by taking a look at the essential headlines from our latest report, and then we'll go on to explore what all of these numbers might mean for you and for your work. More specifically, we'll be looking at how to make more strategic choices for your social media platform mix, how people's online search behaviors are evolving, why it's important to go beyond media headlines when you're building a digital plan, why social media is so important when it comes to news and current affairs, and then we'll finish up by looking at how to select more meaningful metrics for your social media measurement. My presentation should take about 20 minutes, so we'll have plenty of time for your questions after that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Simon. Yeah, let me get a few things organized here on my screen. Yeah, very good. Very informative indeed. So I have two questions from the floor already. So I think that'll get going. Yeah, I'll ask those first before I pose any questions from my side. One of the first questions is about what do you advise on how to plan for B2B marketing? Because I think, yeah, so you didn't actually differentiate much in terms of B2C or B2B, but I think if, let's say, somebody from a B2B company wants to come to you and say, how do we tackle these issues that you mentioned in B2B marketing context?
Yeah, a common question that we get regularly, a lot of our clients are actually B2B marketers as well. I think a couple of really important points. When we're looking at the overall use of digital, obviously, whether somebody uses it in their personal life or at work, those both contribute to the numbers. It's very clear if you're using social or just broader internet media in any setting, there's a good chance that you'll use it in multiple aspects of your life. People tend not to just restrict it. So those general numbers equate just as much to a B2B world as they do to a B2C. When we're looking at social media, obviously the kinds of platforms that people will be looking at when it comes to a work setting will be slightly different, but a lot of the general rules and a lot of the general advice is quite similar. So I think try not to make this important separation and try not to silo too much the idea that social is for consumer audiences and not for B2B. That's absolutely not the case. And in fact, especially with the younger audiences, we're seeing from the latest research that the behaviors that people use in their personal life are actually guiding an awful lot of the work that they would do as a B2B buyer or marketer as well. So that line is very much blurring. And that is particularly true when we come to the search activities that I showed in the presentation just now. So things like voice search, image search, and social media search are all playing a very important part in B2B activities as well. We do have data that shows this is much the case. And the good news is that we will have some more insights on that as part of our upcoming October report, which will be free as well. So do look out for that. If you're looking for more B2B insights, we've got a special new section on B2B marketing in there as well. But I think the key takeaway from all of that is try not to make too much of a delineation in terms of what the audience is doing. The way that you use these tools obviously would be different as a B2B marketer, but in terms of the overall context and the opportunities, there isn't a massive difference between B2C and B2B markets.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, so I I have a question. I think, I don't know if we saw in the slides, one of the channels that I think that one of the audience members wants is, what do you think of the Telegram as a channel? Okay, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Telegram's another one of those great messenger apps. I think it's particularly interesting from the security perspective, but in terms of the functionality within there are some fundamental differences between that and something like a WhatsApp, for example. I think as messengers go, it's very interesting. It's certainly one to explore within your mix. The latest data that we've got that I believe wasn't on the chart that I showed in the video there, but it's now looking at around about 400 million monthly active users. So definitely a sizable reach in terms of the number of people that you can contact through Telegram. I think the key question that I would ask is, why would you think that Telegram offers a distinct opportunity versus the messengers that you've already got at your disposal? I don't mean this in any way judgmentally, so apologies to the person asking the question if this seems a little bit sort of argumentative, but I do feel a lot of the time that marketers have a tendency to get distracted by shiny new toys and the latest things that the media is talking about, rather than focusing on the tools that they've already got and that they've already started to understand. So in my mind, especially when it comes to basic marketing activities, the opportunities that will be available to you on Telegram versus WhatsApp versus Facebook Messenger, they're not going to be dramatically different. As I said, there is a little bit of functionality difference within Telegram that does make it slightly more attractive. But based on all the other options that you've got available to you, I'm not convinced it's always going to be the most obvious piece of opportunity, shall we say, for a marketing perspective. So by all means, experiment with it. But at the same time, look at all the other platforms and ask yourself, is this really the best option for my specific objectives and my specific audience?
And so just continue on this issue of platforms. I think there's an interesting question, and this participants asked, you concentrated a lot in terms of your presentation on what the participant says, quote unquote, leisure social media platforms. Okay, so, and what the person is asking is, how about the person says niche platforms, he mentions LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Which has 600 million members. So anyway, so the idea here is, the question is relating to, okay, I think most of us concentrate on Facebook and YouTube and so on and so forth, but how about this professional sort of a network like LinkedIn, which has quite a large presence as well? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. And the frustrating reason why we don't include LinkedIn in that chart where we've got the ranking of the different platforms is because LinkedIn does not publish monthly active user data anymore. So we do include advertising reach data in our reports, but that is based on total registered members rather than monthly active users. And as a result, we can't offer a direct comparison with the other platforms. So I mean, our ongoing analysis, it's very difficult to get an accurate number for LinkedIn use, but my estimate would be it's roughly 300 to 350 million people using that on a monthly basis. Certainly a very big opportunity. I mean, it's up there in the same sort of world as Twitter and perhaps Snapchat as well. So from that perspective, it's definitely an opportunity for marketers. I think in terms of the fundamental things that you need to think about as a marketer, the principles of social media marketing are very similar on all of these platforms. The formats will change, the kind of audiences that you want to reach will change, but the thinking that you need to go through is almost always the same for every marketer. Who are the people that I want to reach? What do I want to share with them? And how do I want that to influence their thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors? What's the best way of communicating that message in terms of times and places, but also content and formats? Realistically, once you've answered those questions, whether you choose to share that on Twitter or LinkedIn or TikTok is going to come down to the specifics of your audience, but also just in terms of the formats that those platforms offer. So when you're seeing these kinds of metrics, try not to get too hung up on the specifics. Look at the general rules that underlie them and ask yourself, if I wanted to apply this to a different platform, what are all the core basics that I can take away from that and apply to these opportunities that I want to explore?
Okay, yeah. Let me get on video again. Thank you so much, Simon. Yeah, so I think more questions are flowing in, so I'll sort of, choose the next one, which is I think it's multiple questions by the same person, but I think the person is paying attention to what you've said and then maybe wants to get a little bit more insight into it. The question relates to probable reach, I think, versus potential. Yeah, right? Yeah, so how do you determine that? How do you determine what is the probable and the potential reach? Yeah, question. Yeah.
Yeah, that varies quite considerably between platforms, but a great question. Thank you for digging in. I like these challenges. So more of those, please. Potential reach is the overall user base of that platform. So if you look at a platform like Facebook, we're looking at 2.6, 2.7 billion potential reach. Now, as I mentioned in the presentation, Samsung only has 160 million people following the brand. So that is 6% of that total base. And realistically, they're not going to reach all 160 million of those with every post. In fact, the reality is they're much less likely to reach less than 1% of their 6% within that. So the probable reach you need to determine on a case-by-case basis based on the platform that you're using, the size of your current following, the kind of audience that you want to reach, all that kind of stuff. So one of my grave concerns is that an awful lot of the media focus on social media platforms especially focuses on these huge numbers, which are all about the potential reach. And it's so easy for us as marketers to get distracted by that. That's not the reality that we're looking at, especially because we're looking at organic reach, an average, and this includes celebrities and football teams and stuff like that. So for the average brand, it's even lower than this. An average of 5% of your existing follower base you can reach on Facebook through organic posts. In reality, if you want a decent reach of your marketing activities, you're going to need to invest in paid media. And at that point, it just comes down to how much media can you afford and how much reach can you buy with that. So that's the important distinction there between potential and probable.
Yeah, no, it's a good answer. Thank you so much for the question as well, because
Absolutely.
I think digging a little bit into it is, so again, by the same person asks, how do you optimize voice-centric search?
Great question. So this one it's a little bit frustrating because the platforms themselves are not sharing a huge amount of insight into what to do, especially they're not sharing insight in the kinds of questions that people are asking, and they're not really giving us insights into what categories people are searching for either. Google have shared a little bit of tips and tricks, if you like. One of the things that came through really strongly was in order to optimize your ranking within a voice search, you're going to want to start using more natural language structures. So I think a lot of brands, and especially content marketers, have learned the tricks of how to improve ranking for a text-based search environment. But actually, if you look at the way that people search when they're using a voice interface, especially when they're using voice interfaces on a phone, they will use a natural kind of question that you might ask a person face to face. So where is the nearest coffee shop next to me, rather than the text-based version, which would be coffee near me. So even just those sort of slight differences in the structure of the question will result in different rankings for your particular properties on those search engine results pages, if you like. So one of the things to think about is when your particular customer base, when your audience may be involved in using voice interfaces, how might they express the kinds of questions that you would want to rank strongly for? This is a very similar kind of process to what we would do with keywords. We write down all the keywords that we want to rank for. We then look at the sort of broad variations around that, and we start to develop content and strategies around it. The advice here is to follow a roughly similar kind of process, but to focus much more on the way that people would naturally express these questions, and then build content that addresses that by, when you're writing out, for example, a blog post or whatever else, use much more natural sounding conversational text instead of that keyword heavy stuff.
Very good. I think it's still my sense, it's still an evolving sort of an area, because I think people still need to understand how we can do better in terms of that search.
Yeah, but that's a really important point, actually, I think, because it is an emerging area, there's still plenty of opportunity for people to gain a new competitive advantage. So we've had 20 odd years to get the text-based SEO paradigm right, and there's a competitive advantage there, but voice is a different world. Same for image. So a good time to play around and hopefully boost yourself.
Yeah, so now one question is on paid media on Facebook. The question is, do we do it automatically or do we do a manual placement?
Oh, this is a dangerous question. I could get myself into trouble here. If you have the luxury of time and ability to do these things manually, then you may see some benefits to doing so. But in reality, especially if you're a large brand managing multiple different campaigns, you're going to end up with an inefficiency problem there. So even though one or two of those activities may perform better, the reality is the vast majority of your activities won't be able to, because you simply can't optimize them manually. There are all sorts of tools, there are all sorts of great companies out there that can help you with this. So if you're running multiple activities, multiple campaigns, you're optimizing on a regular basis, it's probably largely impractical to try and do it manually. Having said that, if you're a small business, especially if you're like a mom and pop store, or if you're running a blog business, business and that kind of stuff, there is absolutely nothing wrong in managing it manually. I've built plenty of businesses doing it entirely manually myself. It does take time. You have to be a nerd and enjoy it to get the most out of it. You definitely want to be looking at performance and optimizing once you've set things to go. But it's not a problem. You're not going to lose out. You're just going to find that it gets quite tiresome and quite time consuming if you're trying to manage multiple activities.
Yeah, very good, very good. This is a question on customer conversion. I think this is a classic problem we've been facing for almost half a dozen years in organizations. Is that how do you allocate a marketing budget, a balance between digital and non-digital platforms? Okay, so what is your view on that?
Yeah, this is one of those frustrating answers that everybody hates consultants for, because it's an "it depends" answer. But I'm afraid it does come down to very much the industry that you're in, the kinds of products you're selling, the people that you're trying to reach, and the context in which you're trying to do that. My best advice, and this is the way that I approach it myself, so hopefully, this is me eating my own dog food as well. Try things out. I think, a lot of the time marketers are forced into this awkward position where they need to commit to a budget for 12 months, and then they therefore need to make decisions before they've actually had a chance to see what's working and what's not. And I think that, especially in these confusing times of COVID where everything is changing so rapidly, that's a very poor choice when it comes to efficiency. So have that conversation with procurement if that's one of your challenges. Have that with your finance teams as well, and say, look, things are changing rapidly. We're seeing dramatic changes in the way that people use digital media. And as a result of that, we'd like to give ourselves a bit of flexibility to change how we manipulate our investments over time so that we can upweight or downweight things as we learn what works and also as the behaviors change. But I think crucially, try not to think in terms of online and offline if you can. These lines only exist in marketers' heads. If you think about your audience's world, their mobile phone is a device that they use on the sofa, but they also use when they're on the MRT, when they're wandering around a store, all these different kinds of things. So our mobile device is neither online nor offline. It's just a way for us to access the information and the content that matters to us in a specific context. So rather than planning by channel, and especially by trying to divide things by lines, my advice would be to focus on moments and situations and contexts in people's lives as your start point. So when I want to reach my customer base, where is the best time to reach them to do that from a conversion perspective? So if conversions are really what you're looking at, when are they going to be thinking about shopping for these things? When are they going to be thinking about actually checking out and buying these things? And what's the journey that leads up to that? And where are the different opportunities along that journey that I can engage them and I can maybe have an influence? So plan by those situations and moments and contexts, and then look for the opportunities to reach them. And by all means, if you've got a poster on the MRT that in some way triggers people to go and have a look at something on the digital platforms that then leads people to an e-commerce platform, that's absolutely legitimate. There is no need to see that as an offline to online conversion. You're simply guiding people along a journey. So key takeaway, start to forget about those lines as much as you can and think about humans and their purchase journey.
Okay, yeah. So I'm spending the time reading through some of the comments.
Oh, you've got a difficult job to do.
So thank you so much. Yeah. So here is a question on this participant actually read through the report, and then he or she says the gap between search engines and social networks has been closing. Okay? And then the question is fairly long in terms of understanding the nature of social networks as a hubs versus search engines, and so effectively, what I think the question is, how do you develop these social neighborhoods in both these contexts? I think that's the way I understood this question.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So these broadening search behaviors that we're seeing across a variety of different platforms and channels is definitely going to be a challenge for marketers, because search is such a critical part of the overall mix. I think a lot of marketers underestimate just how important search still is, because for whatever reason, it doesn't get the hype in the media that new social platforms do. But search is still the primary channel through which our consumers discover new brands and new products. So internet users around the world, search is the number one, even more than TV ads, even more than word of mouth. So do not under any circumstances underestimate the importance of search. But as I said in my presentation, those search behaviors are evolving quite quickly. So sure enough, the text-based environment of a search engine like Google is still critically important, but people are using voice and image to search within that. But also, as you mentioned, the person who asked that question, we're increasingly looking to social media to do some of our research activities as well. Now, my take on this, and unfortunately we don't have the granular levels of data over time to really confirm or deny this, but my suspicion and my analysis suggests that an awful lot of the activity when it comes to search on social is much earlier in the cycle. So we're doing a lot more sort of generic learning about new categories that we're interested in. So let's suppose that you have decided to take up a new sport and you wanted to understand what clothing you should be buying for that, what kinds of, whether you should buy this particular racket, or should you buy this kind of exercise machine or that kind of exercise machine. A lot of the time we're seeing people going into social and just generically searching for these kinds of exercise regimes, if you like, to see what other people have been posting. We'll also see them doing more generic searches for brands. So rather than just perhaps going in and searching for a specific item, a lot of the time people will just go in and look at a Nike or an Adidas to see what the overall sort of world looks like. Especially true when we come to things like consumer electronics. So we do see sort of fairly broad generic searches for things like Apple or Samsung when it comes to the social searches. So if you think about that in your world, as I mentioned, I think those generic hashtags and content that is optimized for a more generic search within social is definitely something to add to your mix. I want to really stress here that doesn't mean that you throw out all of your great branded content that you did previously. Absolutely not what I'm saying at all, but maybe adding 1 or 2 posts into your regular schedule that caters to that more generic search that non-followers and perhaps new customers may be making. So this is not an either or choice. This is an addition to what you're doing already. So don't stop your search engine marketing. Don't throw away your text-based stuff, and don't throw away your current approach to content marketing. If you can, if you've got the luxury of a bit of extra time and effort to be able to add things into your mix, just create content that speaks to those generic searches so that you are increasing your potential reach and also bringing in new customers into your audience.
Very good, very good. Thank you so much. Yeah. This is a question, I'm going to add an addendum to this question, because this has been one of the areas which I'm still trying to grapple with. Yeah. So this question is about, let me put my video on. So, okay, here we go. So the question suggests that there's a greater disruption to SEM, I think, and particularly with the increased usage of social media and direct search on e-commerce platforms. And related to that, I'll add a little bit of it, and then you can address it whichever way you want. Because one of the things that's happening with Amazon is becoming one of the major search sources, right? I mean, you go to buy a large screen television, and it'll not only give you a bunch of things, but it'll give you all kinds of information about people, ratings and other comments and so on and so forth. So it's not a major threat to Google and others yet, but that is actually an increasing source. And I think the spirit of this question, I think, is these things are actually growing. So just the social media and the direct search channels. So what do you see? What do you foresee is going to happen down the line, right? Yeah. So will SEM die away, or yeah?
It's a really, really important question. I don't see it dying away. I see an awful lot of these as incremental and additional behaviors. And once again, sort of one of the really important takeaways here is these are not binary choices. So let's avoid the sort of the marketing media's obsession with saying this is going to die and this is going to dominate. That's not how consumer behavior works. We saw in my presentation that Yahoo is still one of the 10 most visited websites in the world, and it's been around for 20 odd years. So it's not going to die. It's going to be an important part of the mix, but there are other important things that will gain greater importance over time. So by all means, SEM is absolutely crucial. Do not stop doing it because it's important. SEO and SEOM are both a crucial part of your strategy. But exactly as you said, people are searching in different places now. And I think that the example of searching on e-commerce channels is a really, really important one. So if you look at the very confused consumer journeys that many of us go through, whether it's B2B or B2C brands, increasingly people are turning to, whether it's, you know, consumer facing e-commerce platforms or B2B buyer sort of marketplaces. A lot of the time people like to search within those places, not just to see things like prices, just to get a gauge, you know, am I in the right kind of price range? Can I afford this? Is it a bargain? But they're also looking for things like reviews. They're looking for how many people have reviewed it. They're looking for the quality. They're just looking for a bit more broader context. And if you think about the way that a classic Google search would work, you'll definitely get some of the more sophisticated reviews. You'll see perhaps a consumer survey that's actually looked at different products in a particular category and gives you their rankings of the 10 best phones for fall 2020 and stuff like that. I think what's really important though is that that's not really just what people are looking for. They're looking for many more kinds of insights when they're searching in these different places. And at the moment, a search engine is a very specific kind of, it takes you from A to B. And what people really want is A to Z in their answers now as well. So that's why they're broadening these behaviors. So I would suggest do as many of these as you can. I appreciate your marketers with limited resources and limited time. If search, and especially if you're a commerce brand with search, it's a fundamentally important part of your mix, then definitely explore it. But if you're more of a brand-oriented marketer, I'd suggest handing that one off to another member of your team to explore, because it's definitely, it's a nuanced thing that you're going to need some specific skills to understand.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so Huling actually prods me because there was a question on TikTok. I seem to have
favorite.
Because I think the same person asked about the paid media, to place it auto on manual. So the question is in terms of what are your views on TikTok as a platform, and how do you actually, how is it suitable for B2B marketing if it is?
Oh, I'm gonna stick my neck out here. Realistically, TikTok is not the best place for B2B marketing. It doesn't mean that you cannot do it, but you have so many better options that are going to be much more efficient and effective for you that I would suggest you try not to get distracted by it. That isn't to say you shouldn't do it, but realistically, it's not your best choice. From a B2C perspective, though, TikTok is fascinating. I mean, I'm just blown away by what that has changed in the way that the social media environment is evolving. So if you look at the way that TikTok works, it's a constant feed of shorter content. Now, that's not perhaps dramatically new. You could say that it's relatively similar to perhaps the feeds in Instagram and Snapchat, but the algorithm is focused far more on which content is generically popular across all users rather than focusing on a social graph that perhaps a Snapchat or an Instagram would look at. So it's less interested in the people that you're directly connected to, and it's more interested in what people that exhibit similar behaviors to you are interested in when it comes to content, even if you don't know those people and even if they're on the other side of the world. So I think the kinds of content that really succeed on TikTok is very short, punchy, succinct kinds of bits of content. If you've got a message that you can very clearly deliver quickly and in an entertaining way, then TikTok is a brilliant platform, provided you're looking at slightly younger users. I mean, even though we are seeing a general broadening of the overall TikTok audience, the vast majority of TikTok users around the world are still below the age of 25. So if you're looking at older users, sure enough, it's interesting. Play around with a couple of paid media placements to see whether they work for you. But realistically, you've got other channels that are probably going to reach a broader audience if you're looking for those older users. So my advice would be, especially with the diplomatic tensions around TikTok, it's a difficult one to put your eggs in as an organic platform. I'm certainly not saying that you should not look at it, but I think for the time being, perhaps hold back on investing huge amounts of money to build your organic presence on TikTok. What I would recommend is if you're interested in the platform, as I said, try out some paid media placements on the platform with some very specific objectives that you can measure accurately. Don't go with how many people watched it, because that is an easy gaming metric. You can trick that if you want to have an outcome to your business that you want to measure. Do some small tests on TikTok, and if it's working, absolutely do more. If it's not, try a different platform and see which ones work better.
I was thinking with TikTok, the app itself or guys who manage this essentially have to probably develop some of the stuff, right? I mean, or let's say they hire agencies and do it. So instead of actually having real people doing this dancing, right? So you can create a dance which actually might be applicable to a particular brand or a product. So anyway, so I think this is still in an early stage, and I hope these guys get past the tension that's going on now. Yeah. What's interesting is that TikTok doesn't exist in China. Yeah. So they're one of the biggest markets. They're not allowed to actually function in as TikTok in China, is what I heard, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got Douyin, which is pretty much the same thing. Apologies for my terrible pronunciation. I know I'm going to get scolded for that. But yeah, it's essentially the same platform. The content is hosted in different places, but ultimately the experience that you're seeing there is quite different. However, the really important difference between the Chinese version and everywhere else is just the level of engagement that the audience is giving. The Chinese audience on Douyin is so much more engaged. People are using it for the live streaming e-commerce activities that are a hugely important opportunity, increasingly in Southeast Asia as well. So if there is a way for you to access the Chinese version of it and see what's going on, please take time to look at that, because it's just fascinating.
Very interesting indeed. Yeah. This was a question about, you mentioned India and Indonesia was very high on usage. And so the question is, yeah, they're not native English speakers. Yeah. And so the question is, what is the correlation between the English preferred sort of audience and the choice of search method?
A really good question. There are two important things to think about why those countries are particularly high. The first of them is not actually language, although language is important. I'll come on to that. But the main driver behind the ranking, if you like, on that chart is how long people have been on the internet. So the newer the user is to the online world, the more likely they are to never learn to type. Now, if you think about the average teenager in Indonesia who's never had a computer, they've just got a mobile phone, and it pops up with the Bahasa equivalent of the QWERTY keyboard, and it's a bit like, why would I learn how to type into this thing when I can just speak directly into the interface and find what I'm looking for? Realistically, typing is not an efficient interface. It's a really poor way of getting to what you want quickly. And voice interfaces are an absolutely brilliant way of doing it. One of the big problems in marketing is we've been online for a long time as marketers. We tend to be an earlier adopter in many technologies, but especially with the internet, because it's such an important part of marketing, we've developed habits that we're ingrained in, and we are slower to adopt these new technologies that perhaps our audiences have quickly embraced. Now, that leads us to the really important second bit of this, which is language. And I think, especially when you're looking at non-English languages, because so much of the text on the internet is English-based, more than half of all text around the world on the internet is in English, which means that if you're entering a text-based search in English, you're going to get great results. But if you're entering text-based queries in other languages, you may not get such good quality findings and results. And as a result of that, people are sort of, they're using the voice interfaces. That is rapidly improving the machine learning opportunities for the voice element of it. And actually, we're getting to the stage quite quickly where the voice-driven results are going to be more representative than the text ones, because it has more to work with and the machine learning is accelerating so much faster. So the great irony here is, while so much of today's internet is based in text English, what we may see is those other non-English languages getting a real boost because of this, because the other language is going to be much better catered to. So a lot of nuances into the reasons why there, but I would suggest that it's not just about language, it's also about recency of adoption and also median age. So many things in the internet world are driven by the median age of your audience. So please do break all of these things down by demographics. If you're looking for older audiences, look at what they're doing and how that differs to younger users, because there's way too much generic advice on the internet that doesn't necessarily apply to your specific audience.
Very good. Yeah, very good. Yeah, I think this question just came by, so I'll come back to the other questions just prior to it, but this is related to what you were saying. So I think it expands some of the thoughts that you had. So we have now different ways to search, right? There's a voice search, there's obviously text search, and then potentially video search as well, I presume. So how do you think, how do you rank these methods in terms of, and I think you answered a little bit of it, but how do you rank these methods in the future? What will sort of dominate, right? Yeah. And let me look at the second part of the question. Does marketing campaigns and brands need across all optimize these vehicles more importantly? And also, I think the question is also, with limited budgets, time and capabilities, what do we do, right? I mean, so with all the stuff that we have discussed, it looks like we are having increasingly more choices, more platforms, more ways to search, more ways to engage, more ways to reach out. So suddenly things have not become simpler, they've become more complicated.
Absolutely.
Right? So I think, I mean, in that spirit, I think this is a great question, not in just a formal way in terms of between the three parts, but as an advertiser, as a company, how do you manage these growing technology and platforms and search methods?
So I think my main advice here would be try not to overload yourselves by doing too many things all at once, especially trying to do everything at once is a real danger because you don't invest enough time in doing it properly. So voice search is going to be particularly relevant for searches that are done on the go. So a lot of people, when they think about voice search, they think about things like an Amazon Alexa or a Google Home. That is not the opportunity in this part of the world. It's certainly an interesting opportunity, but by far the biggest use case scenario is searches using voice on a mobile phone. And a lot of that is going to be people that are out and about. They may have earpods, they may have similar kinds of things, and they're just looking for quick answers for something when they don't want to take their phone out of their pocket. So if you're the kind of brand that is, if you're a restaurant, if you're a shop, if you're that kind of thing, and you know that people are going to be searching for basic directions and stuff, then voice might be a great thing for you to look at. Conversely, if you're an e-commerce brand in an aesthetic category like fashion or furnishings or even consumer electronics, image search is going to be really important to you because people may spot somebody walking down the street with a brilliant outfit. They want to find those items. They snap a picture, they use Google Lens or Pinterest Lens to find it, and off they go. So if you're in an aesthetic category, then image search is definitely an opportunity. But if you're not in an aesthetic category, you probably don't need to worry about it too much. So I think, it's a bit like you've got a massive toolbox in front of you with lots and lots of different tools. Don't look at the toolbox. Look at what you're trying to build, what you're trying to actually do as a marketer, and then ask yourself, which tool would help me most with this? Only if it's relevant to your brand should you be doing it. Don't get distracted by doing stuff that's got no relevance. I know it's exciting and all these great tools look amazing, but they can just be a distraction and a waste of your money. So it's difficult. Don't get me wrong. With so many options, it can be alarming. Hopefully the free reports that we make available will help you to identify what your audience is doing, so at least you can make some better informed decisions of what to drop.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So getting to the end of the session, I have a couple of questions. More left is social commerce. Yeah, there's a question on social commerce. What do you see the near-term future for this? I know that there's an increasing interest in this. Yeah. So what do you think?
So this is a really important distinction to make at the beginning of this. There's social commerce and then there's social checkout. Social commerce is the entire journey. Let's call it social shopping. Huge. It's probably going to be one of our top 3 things that we'll be looking at as part of our analysis next year. And I think social's role within the overall journey is definitely growing. So we saw previously in my presentation the importance of things like social search. That is increasingly important within that broader journey. So social shopping, whether it's live stream commerce, whether it is people doing their research on social media, definitely an opportunity. We'll have a lot more data coming on that in the coming reports that are all free, as I mentioned. So keep track of that. I'm guessing though the question may be more about social checkouts. So buying things directly on a social platform. Ironically, the research that we've seen from Global Web Index shows that people are not against it, but it's definitely not the shopper's top priority. If you gave them the option between being able to check out on a social platform or giving them free delivery and stuff like that, free delivery is 8 to 10 times more important. So don't get hung up on the buy button on a social platform. A simple link through to your e-commerce website is still going to be just as effective in the near term.
Yeah, very good. Thank you so much. I think that's a fascinating question. I think there's a lot of talk about social commerce. I think maybe we still fully don't understand exactly what it means. A couple of questions. One, I think it looks like more like a common. Yeah, you mentioned Yahoo in Japan is still is quite a dominant search tool, and I think that the person basically commenting on it, it looks like it's mostly in Japan that.
No, so in Japan specifically, Yahoo is still the dominant property, but that Yahoo data that I showed is actually global as well. So Yahoo.com at a global level is hugely important. A lot of earlier adopters are still using it now. It's very important for finance. It's hugely popular for weather, and weather is one of the top search queries around the world anyway. So sure enough, Yahoo may not be the sexiest brand in terms of the media's perception, but it is hugely valuable in terms of a regular opportunity to reach probably slightly older audiences.
Okay, very good. Yeah. One question on Chinese apps. Yeah, they're increasingly obviously influential outside China.
Yes.
And TikTok is one of the examples that we cited. Yeah. So do you sense these problems to be temporary? I mean, are these guys essentially will continue to be influential? Because one thing that is clear, I think, when you mentioned TikTok is, I think surely the Chinese essentially have come a long way in terms of actually being now in a leadership role on AI. Okay. why didn't other companies who already existed, like Google, Facebook, you name it, all of these guys had the potential to develop something. They didn't. Now they're all scrambling to do TikTok replicas, right? So the idea here is, yeah, Chinese apps will probably be continuing unless once the political issues essentially get sorted out. But what do you see the trend in terms of are the problems that Chinese apps have currently, are they temporary? Or see further deterioration,
I think are the problems temporary? The diplomatic tensions that go around them are a lot more deep-rooted than I think that the conversations we're seeing in the news are. I think that there is a genuine concern amongst Silicon Valley about the rise of China's internet influence, and that's not necessarily just a political story, that's a commercial one as well. So this is a really good question, so thank you whoever asked this. One of the most interesting trends that we've been tracking this year is what we've called the rise of the East. So it's not just platforms on social media like TikTok, it's very much more the rise of China's e-commerce platforms, and that is especially true in Southeast Asia. So just looking at things like Taobao, Tmall, even JD to a certain extent, we're seeing these Chinese e-commerce giants suddenly becoming much more popular at a global level, and that's having a huge influence on the way that the world at large is approaching e-commerce. So even for a platform like Amazon, they may be slightly nervous about what this means from a bottom line perspective, but the expectations that those users will have in terms of the UI and UX of the platforms will also change dramatically, because if you've ever used those platforms, they're quite different. You know, the Chinese e-commerce experience is quite different to a Western one. So we're going to see quite a lot of change there. It's not just Asian audiences that are engaging with this either. We're starting to see Middle Eastern and African audiences engage with these Chinese platforms too. So there is I'm not going to call it a fight, but there's definitely it's not one-sided anymore. The internet is not about Silicon Valley anymore. And I think we'll increasingly see not just Chinese, but broader Asian brands having a massive influence. I don't think that the American government and American companies are very comfortable with losing their dominance on that. And I think that may be one of the reasons underlying the conversations that we're seeing amongst politicians now, is that they recognize that this is a very big thing for businesses. So I don't see that tension disappearing, but I certainly don't see the Chinese brands losing out on a global stage for the foreseeable future. Maybe in the US, maybe in Europe, but globally they've got increasing influence, and I see that continuing.
Because I developed a lecture for my Chinese executives a couple of years ago about showdown in Shanghai. I mean, just to give a sense in terms of what's going on in the Western companies coming into China and not succeeding very well, including Amazon, and obviously Facebook was banned, but companies like Airbnb essentially is not very successful, whereas the local companies are. So anyway, and now I'm shifting the gears out of China. I mean, it's not a showdown in China any longer.
No.
You're doing showdown of China in all other markets. Chinese companies invested $5 to $10 billion in Indian companies in the last 5 years. They're investing heavily in Africa. They're investing heavily in Latin America. And so what you see is, even if they don't go into US, and I think many of these companies have bypassed US, and they're actually trying to actually compete in these markets and doing very well. I mean, the Chinese smartphone maker is the third largest smartphone seller in India. So suddenly you look at Xiaomi is number 3, and so suddenly you look at all these markets, and the Chinese essentially have done it. Anyway, so this is a little bit off topic, but it's fascinating to see how these things are evolving, and the importance of China as a country which is actually innovating heavily into AI and other kinds of things is important.
I don't think it's off topic at all. I think you're absolutely right in those comments. For an awful lot of the last decade, the opportunity was about Western brands going into China, and we've missed the boat on this one. I think a lot of brands that have been looking at that, because already this year, Statista reporting that 60% of global e-commerce value will come out of Asia. So this is already the more valuable place to be. And you've got these Chinese brands that are, they're very successful across Southeast Asia, and they're broadening that opportunity. So this is not about one market. The cultural aspects are going to be crucially important here. So I think a lot of people getting distracted by things like algorithms and whatever else, but it's how those algorithms are catering to culture that is the key determinant of success. And I think what has been really successful about TikTok is that its approach to that algorithm that it uses to serve content it looks at a variety of factors like your geographic location to inform what that is. So culturally, it's going to be slightly better placed, and that's all it takes. We're not talking about a black and white thing here. A fraction of a % of improvement is all it takes to win the race in a lot of these situations. So lots more exciting stuff to come here, I think.
No, no, it's very interesting. So a couple of questions. I think I sort of seem to have missed a question because it was a small line. So the question was, do you have tips for a good caption?
I'm not a copywriter. You need to ask your agents. Sorry.
So that was one of the questions, I think. Yeah, so I just want to make sure that I get it across. And so I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, you can suggest some places where somebody can get. Maybe not. I mean, one of the ideas, maybe not. It's not giving them a tip without context, but maybe an example or two is probably what this questioner was asking. Do you have any idea of good captions that might have actually,
So
strikes your fancy? Yeah.
Quite ironic. Just before I joined today's session, I was looking through LinkedIn, and there was a free guide to copywriting, especially for the internet world. Marketingexamples.com would be my recommendation. So go and have a look at this. It's a relatively new website from what I can see. Apologies to any copywriters that are here today that are saying, no, send them to my agency. But marketingexamples.com has a really, really good guide to copywriting on it. It's about 70 slides, but they're really, really simple. Great advice on how to write captions. So hopefully that's a useful tip.
Very good. Excellent. Yeah. The last question. Okay. So this is a question where it says content marketing is now potentially can be developed by robots.
Yes.
Okay.
Potentially.
Okay. So then it's a replacement for many of the agency guys, if let's say that happens. Anyway, so the question is, content marketing can be done by robots. What do you foresee a limit to this trend?
Okay, so I'm going to be a little bit provocative here. Apologies to the person that asked this question, because again, I'm going to seem a little bit aggressive here, but I think it certainly can do, in the same way that you could quite happily hire a robot to keep your partner happy in your marriage, but that's probably not the route to happiness. Well, maybe it is. But I think a lot of the time, marketers make the mistake of thinking about how do they populate their content calendar versus how do they achieve the outcomes that they're looking for. My most important advice when it comes to questions like this is don't focus on the output that you're creating, focus on the outcome that you want to achieve. What is the best way, the most likely way that you're achieving the outcome that you're aiming for? A content calendar has zero value if it's not delivering an outcome. So sure enough, these things do exist and they can create content. And look, I've seen some amazing tools out there that do create great content that delivers the outcome, but it's only when it does that that I care about it. So always start from that perspective. I don't think that we're ever going to see the end to the human contribution to this, because so much of it comes down to art, and an understanding of what works in art is not about just aesthetics. It's about emotions and it's about empathy and all these kinds of things. Those are the skills that we really need if we're going to create great marketing once AI really takes hold. So you're not going to be out of a job. Your job is going to change. And the people that succeed best in that new world are the ones that really understand what makes a human human, and what really speaks to the inner emotions and the things that make each person quirkily different. The AI will deliver all of the great ways of addressing those opportunities for you, but your job is to be an expert in humans.
Very good. Excellent. Yeah. On that note, Simon, yeah, so thank you so much. Let's actually give a round of applause for Simon. I think that's a fantastic sort of a conversation. You kept me on my toes reading the questions, and I think really the questions did make a lot of difference. I mean, the engagement of the audience was so important. Thank you all for not just attending, but actually participating in it. And now Healing has actually flashed a slide. Please use this QR code to provide us the feedback, because this has been a marvelous session. Yeah.
Super.
So provocative, and also really very, very interesting for probably a lot of members of the audience who actually sort of really asked a lot of very interesting questions.
Great questions. Thank you, folks.
Yeah. And thank you all for coming and during your lunch hour. I'm hoping you did have a lunch while you're actually listening to Simon. And we wish you the best. And then hopefully you'll join us on the other Center for Marketing Excellence seminars. Yeah. So look forward to seeing you guys again. Okay. Thank you very much, Simon. Yeah, for a wonderful presentation, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Same.
Okay?
Cheers.
Bye-bye.